The moment I knew my world was crumbling wasn't when I found the email in my spam folder. It wasn't even when I realized my presentation slides had been mysteriously corrupted the night before the biggest pitch of my career. No, the real moment hit like a punch to the gut when I walked into the conference room and saw her, Madison, the golden child of our marketing firm, presenting my ideas to the client, using my research, delivering my carefully crafted strategy as if she'd thought of it herself. She didn't even glance my way when I slipped in late, having spent the morning frantically trying to recover my files. Just continued speaking with that confident smile, gesturing at slides that contained months of my work. As you can see, she said, clicking to my competitive analysis chart, we've identified 3 key market gaps that align perfectly with your expansion goals. My competitive analysis. My market gaps. My expansion strategy. The client nodded enthusiastically. The partners took notes. And Madison basked in the praise like she'd discovered fire. I sat in the back row, watching my career being stolen in real time, and did the only thing I could do. I smiled. A small, quiet smile that gave nothing away. Because if there's one thing you learn in this business, it's that the person talking the loudest usually has the least to say. My name is Cameron Torres, and I'd been at Pinnacle Marketing for 4 years. Not the longest tenure, but long enough to understand how the game was played. Work hard, stay late, build relationships, deliver results. Simple formula that had served me well. I wasn't the office star, that was Madison's role. Fresh from Northwestern with an MBA she never let anyone forget about, Madison had charmed her way to the top of our creative team within 18 months. She had the kind of confidence that made partners lean in during meetings and the kind of smile that made everyone assume she knew what she was talking about. But I had something Madison didn't, actual experience. While she networked at happy hours, I stayed late perfecting campaigns. While she posted LinkedIn articles about disruptive marketing, I was in the trenches solving client problems. The Hartwell Foods account was supposed to be my breakthrough. A regional grocery chain looking to expand nationally, they needed a comprehensive rebranding strategy. Everything I'd learned in 4 years would culminate in this one pitch. I spent 3 months on that proposal. Weekends at the office, late nights in my apartment, spreadsheets that made my eyes bleed. I interviewed customers, analyzed competitor campaigns, even drove to different Hartwell locations to understand their brand positioning firsthand. The research was beautiful. Clean data that told a clear story about market opportunities and consumer behavior. The strategy was elegant, a 3-phase rollout that would establish Hartwell as a premium but accessible brand in new markets. I'd never been more proud of any work in my life. 2 weeks before the presentation, I made a critical mistake. During our monthly team meeting, when partners asked for updates on major pitches, I shared my enthusiasm about the Hartwell strategy. I mentioned the key insights I discovered and outlined my approach. Madison sat across the table, nodding with what I thought was supportive interest. She asked thoughtful questions about my research methodology and complimented my thorough approach. I should have recognized that look in her eyes. The same expression she'd worn when she absorbed credit for our summer intern's social media campaign. The same smile she'd flashed before presenting Tom's client retention analysis as her own insight. But I was too excited about my work to see the warning signs. This sounds incredible, Cameron, she'd said after the meeting. Would you mind sharing some of your research files? I'd love to understand your process better for future reference. Collaboration, I thought. Finally, someone wants to learn from my methods. I sent her everything. Market data, customer interviews, competitive analyses, strategic frameworks. A complete blueprint of 3 months' work, handed over with naive trust. The night before the Hartwell presentation, I was putting finishing touches on my slides when my laptop crashed. Blue screen of death, total system failure. When I managed to restart, every file related to Hartwell had been corrupted. Presentation slides, research documents, backup analyses, everything reduced to digital garbage. Panic doesn't adequately describe what I felt. I spent until 4 a.m. trying to recover the files, calling IT support, attempting data recovery software. Nothing worked. By morning, I had managed to reconstruct maybe 30% of my presentation from memory and scattered notes. I rushed to the office, hoping I could somehow salvage the pitch, only to discover that Madison had volunteered to handle the Hartwell presentation since I was clearly having technical difficulties. She delivered it flawlessly. Because it was my strategy, refined and polished using my research, presented with the confidence of someone who knew every detail because she'd stolen every detail. The Hartwell pitch was a massive success. The client signed immediately, praising the innovative approach and deep market understanding. Madison became the firm's rising star overnight. Partners who'd barely noticed her before were suddenly discussing her partnership potential. Exceptional work, managing partner David Chen told her in front of the entire team. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking that sets us apart. Madison glowed under the praise, accepting congratulations with graceful modesty. I couldn't have done it without such a collaborative team, she said, her eyes finding mine with what looked like sympathy but felt like mockery. The narrative quickly solidified around the office. Madison was a prodigy who'd landed the biggest account of the quarter. I was the guy who'd had a computer crash at the worst possible moment. Technology fails at the most inconvenient times, colleagues would say with patronizing sympathy. Better luck next time, Cameron. Madison didn't overtly gloat. She was too smart for that. Instead, she weaponized kindness, offering to mentor me through future presentations and suggesting I might benefit from additional technical training to prevent future mishaps. The condescension was masterful. She positioned herself as the gracious winner helping a struggling colleague, which made her look even better while making me appear incompetent. Within weeks, I was reassigned to smaller accounts. Nothing personal, David Chen explained. But maybe you should focus on building your foundation before taking on major pitches. Madison, meanwhile, was given the premium client roster and a promotion to senior creative director. I watched from my diminished cubicle as she held court in meetings, dispensing wisdom about brand strategy and market positioning. Wisdom that sounded remarkably familiar because I'd written most of it in my original research. Most people would have updated their resume and started job hunting. I considered it. But something about Madison's smug confidence bothered me more than the stolen credit. She wasn't just a talented colleague who'd outmaneuvered me. She was a fraud who'd built her reputation on other people's work. And frauds, I realized, always make mistakes. I started paying attention differently. Not to what Madison was saying in meetings, but to what she wasn't saying. Not to her successes, but to the details that didn't quite add up. During her next presentation, she referenced consumer behavior data from a market that had been extensively researched by Tom, our data analyst, 6 months earlier. She presented insights about demographic trends that came directly from our intern Sarah's summer project. She even quoted client feedback that originated from customer interviews I'd conducted for a different account entirely. Madison wasn't just a one-time plagiarist. She was a systematic credit thief who'd been operating for months, maybe longer. I started documenting everything. Not maliciously, just carefully. When Madison presented original concepts, I noted which team member had actually developed them. When she claimed credit for successful campaigns, I tracked who'd done the actual work. I also began reaching out to junior staff members she'd stepped on. Sarah, the intern whose research had been appropriated, was still bitter about seeing her work presented without acknowledgement. Tom had watched Madison claim his data analysis during multiple client meetings. She's really good at making herself sound brilliant, Tom confided during a coffee break. But if you look closely, she never actually creates anything new. One by one, a picture emerged of someone who'd mastered the art of intellectual theft, always careful to target people too junior to complain effectively or too trusting to protect their work. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my reputation through smaller accounts Madison had dismissed as beneath her attention. A local restaurant chain looking to modernize their brand. A boutique fitness studio wanting to expand. A family-owned bookstore needing digital marketing guidance. These weren't glamorous Fortune 500 campaigns, but they were real businesses run by people who appreciated genuine effort. I threw myself into each project with the same intensity I'd given Hartwell, building relationships and delivering measurable results. Slowly, my confidence returned. Not through flashy presentations or office politics, but through the satisfaction of solving actual problems for grateful clients. 2 months after the Hartwell disaster, I noticed something interesting. Madison had been assigned the Morrison Industries account, a tech startup looking to rebrand before their IPO. It was the kind of high-stakes, career-defining project that partners saved for their most trusted talent. During team meetings, Madison spoke about Morrison with her usual confidence. Cutting-edge approach, she called it. Revolutionary positioning strategy. But when pressed for details, her answers became vague. Still in the research phase, she'd say with that winning smile. Can't reveal too much before the presentation. I knew that smile. It was the same one she'd worn when stealing my Hartwell strategy. Through careful observation and casual conversations with junior staff, I pieced together what was happening. Madison was floundering. The Morrison executives were sophisticated tech veterans who asked hard questions about market data and competitive positioning. They weren't impressed by buzzwords and charm. She needed something substantive, something detailed, something brilliant. She needed what she'd always needed, someone else's work to steal. That's when I made my choice. Not for revenge, but for justice. I spent the next month creating the most elaborate, detailed, impressive marketing strategy I'd ever developed. Market research that would make business schools weep. Competitive analysis so thorough it bordered on surveillance. A positioning strategy so innovative it could redefine the entire tech sector. Then I made sure Madison could find it. I left drafts in shared folders she had access to. I discussed my theoretical approaches during casual conversations where she might overhear. I even mentioned my Morrison case study during a team lunch, describing it as practice work for future similar accounts. Madison took the bait beautifully. Within days, I noticed her confidence about Morrison returning. She started dropping hints about her breakthrough insights and paradigm-shifting approach. 2 weeks later, she requested access to my research files for general reference and collaborative input. I gave her everything, just like before. But this time was different. This time, I'd hidden something in my research that Madison, in her rush to steal credit, would never notice. The Morrison presentation was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Madison had been building anticipation for days, promising partners that her strategy would revolutionize how we approached tech accounts. I arrived early and took a seat in the back corner, clipboard in hand like I was there to take notes for absent colleagues. Madison entered confidently, her presentation loaded and ready. She began brilliantly, outlining market opportunities and competitive landscapes with authority that came from detailed research, my detailed research. The Morrison executives nodded approvingly. Partners scribbled notes with growing excitement. 20 minutes in, Madison clicked to her strategic recommendations slide, the centerpiece of the entire presentation. That's when she read aloud, with complete confidence, based on our comprehensive market analysis, we recommend positioning Morrison Industries with the tagline innovation through authentic disruption. A message that will resonate across all demographic segments while maintaining premium brand equity. The room murmured approval. It sounded sophisticated, strategic, cutting edge. There was just one problem. Innovation through authentic disruption wasn't a tagline. It was an acronym. ITAD. I took all data. I'd buried my signature in plain sight, and Madison had just confessed to intellectual theft in front of the entire firm leadership and our most important prospective client. The Morrison CEO, a sharp woman named Dr. Patricia Liu, tilted her head slightly. That's an interesting tagline, she said carefully. Could you break down the strategic thinking behind each word choice? Madison's confident smile flickered. She'd memorized my research but hadn't understood the deeper strategy behind every element. When pressed to explain the psychological impact of authentic disruption versus other positioning options, she began stumbling. Well, authentic speaks to genuineness, she managed, sweat forming on her forehead. And disruption is obviously about innovation and... Excuse me, Dr. Liu interrupted gently. But that acronym spells something unusual. ITAD. Was that intentional? The room went silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming, papers rustling, someone's stomach growling. Madison stared at the screen, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then pure terror. She started, then stopped. The acronym wasn't. That's not. David Chen leaned forward, his expression shifting from pride to concern. Madison, what exactly is the significance of ITAD? I stood up slowly from my corner seat. All eyes turned toward me. It means I took all data, I said quietly. It's what someone might say if they'd stolen research instead of conducting their own. The explosion was immediate. Madison's face went white as paper. The Morrison team exchanged sharp glances. Partners started whispering furiously among themselves. This is ridiculous, Madison sputtered. Cameron is obviously trying to sabotage me because he's jealous about Hartwell. Actually, I interrupted, walking to the front of the room, I have documentation. I'd prepared for this moment. From my folder, I pulled out timestamped drafts of my research, email chains showing my interview requests with Morrison's customers, and screenshots of my analysis frameworks, all dated weeks before Madison claimed to have developed her strategy. Every insight in this presentation came from research I conducted independently, I explained to the room, including the deliberately misleading acronym I embedded to prove intellectual theft. Dr. Liu stood up, her expression ice-cold. We'll be suspending this evaluation pending a review of your firm's ethical standards, she announced. Morrison Industries doesn't partner with organizations that tolerate plagiarism. She gathered her materials and walked out, followed by her team. The room erupted. Partners demanding explanations. Madison claiming misunderstanding. David Chen looking like he'd swallowed glass. But I just collected my papers and headed for the door. The truth had spoken for itself. Madison was terminated within the week. The Morrison account was permanently lost. And I found myself in David Chen's office, being offered Madison's former position and a formal apology. Your approach to this situation showed remarkable professionalism, he said, though we both knew he was really saying thank you for not suing us into oblivion. 3 months later, I was leading the creative team with a philosophy based on actual collaboration rather than credit theft. The junior staff members Madison had stepped on became some of my strongest allies, and the culture shifted toward recognizing real contributions. Sarah, the former intern, was promoted to junior analyst. Tom became our lead data researcher. And I finally learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better, one authentic achievement at a time. The last I heard, Madison was working at a small agency across town, where her Northwestern MBA and stolen insights couldn't protect her from having to actually produce original work. Sometimes I wonder if she ever figured out what ITAD really meant. Probably not. People who take shortcuts rarely bother to understand the details. But I sleep well knowing that while she's still looking for the next thing to steal, I'm building something that can't be taken, a reputation based on work that's actually mine. Because the truth always has the last laugh.